Thank you everybody for joining. I'm going to get started here. I know we still have people joining, but I just want to get through it. Obviously, there'll be a few intro slides anyway, so I can talk through those first. Just to introduce myself, I'm Paul Ireland, the VP of Life Sciences and Product Owner here at DocShifter. What we're going to do today is present the material we presented at the recent DIA Regulatory Submissions Information and Document Management Forum, which thankfully gets abbreviated to RSIDM because it is a mouthful. So we were there at the beginning of the month, and we were lucky enough to kind of be invited to speak at that conference. And we were focusing on the topic of automation in document management, some other things that can be automated. And our part was kind of looking at how you could, what additional things you could automate through the use of advanced rendering. So basically, I'm going to represent that material. It's exactly the material that we presented at the conference for many of you who weren't able to attend. If you were able to attend the meeting and you were in that session, freezing along with the rest of us that were there, there's going to be nothing new here. I want to save you the time if you were able to join that session, that there is nothing new here. It's a presentation of that material. So with that, I do just want to go through. This is a disclaimer because I'm using the same slide deck. It's a DIA disclaimer because this was presented at their forum, not necessary here. But what I want to talk through a little bit is kind of just to set things up, a little bit about content life cycles and kind of where the rendering kind of part of the process fits in there. Talk a little bit about what I mean by advanced rendering and what types of things can be automated, leveraging technology you probably already have in-house. But some of the advanced rendering techniques and things that can be used to help automate kind of content preparation processes and kind of how that can be set up, along with some closing remarks. A lot of this material is going to be quite high level at this point. We've run a number of webinars focused on a lot of the individual topics that I'll introduce. So we have a whole series of webinars focusing on those different components. And this one, I'm going to kind of talk through a little bit higher level, what's possible, basically. But if we look at a typical piece of content's kind of life cycle through your document management system, you're typically authoring content in platforms like Word within your document management system, authoring that content, manually, for the large part. There's obviously a lot of conversations about how content is being generated automatically more and more, but it's still often a very manual element in the authoring of that content. With the review, obviously reviewing the content, updating it, etc. as well. Again, that's typically a very manual process, kind of looking for issues, looking for errors, kind of formatting issues, formatting them, updating any issues that you come across is all, again, typically very manual. At various points in the life cycle of the content, that files, those documents will be rendered or converted into PDF. And again, that can be a manual process in some organizations using desktop tools. It can be batch, or it could be automated as part of your document management system as well. Those PDFs are often then prepared to be included in submissions. The initial rendition often isn't really submission ready initially, so you often use additional tools to prepare it for inclusion in a submission. And then you draft, publish, and you validate the submission at the end, which also includes an element of content, individual content checks as well, to make sure the PDFs are actually compliant as well and meet the specifications. So it's still a content check, if you like, very much at the end. So that would be a typical kind of life cycle of content, of an individual piece of content, just for context. Obviously, there's a lot of challenges in preparing that content for use in submissions and for inclusion and submitting to the health authorities. Often the process is extremely slow and very manual. There's a number of steps in that process that are still manual today. And again, more and more of those hopefully can be automated through other types of kind of content automation. Often it's obviously resource intensive. You have a lot of people involved in the creation, both internally and externally, creating the content. And obviously it's time consuming. And because it's manual, anything that's manual obviously introduces an element of risk. The process can be quite complex because you're using maybe different tools to prepare the content for inclusion, making sure that everything is compliant, includes the correct elements, etc. So there's often quite a high training burden on making sure everybody is familiar with all the tools needed, to reduce the risk, to kind of make sure everything is ready. So a number of challenges that kind of a lot of our clients are facing. The tools that you're using often are, and again, this is just a snapshot. Obviously, there may be other specific tools you're using as well. In terms of the authoring tools, often it's the Office platform, for example, for Word, authoring the content, and maybe Excel used at times, etc. There are other tools available, of course, that you may be using to author content or generate content automatically as well. You may well be using a lot of desktop tools also, as well as your enterprise, content management system or your RIM tools that you may use to create the PDFs and prepare the PDFs for submissions. You may often still use a lot of desktop tools to prepare your PDFs, for example, after converting to PDF, making sure they meet all the compliance requirements using tools like Acrobat or various toolbox plugins, smart desk tools, etc. as well. So with that, again, a lot of what we're sort of finding is, from the PDF perspective, we ask a lot of questions about where are you spending the most time in preparing your content for inclusion in submissions as well. And this is just a breakdown from the conversations we've had. There's a lot of time spent kind of making sure bookmarks are created at the appropriate levels and in the correct way to help for, speedy navigation through your submission as well. Adding the hyperlinks. Sometimes they flip-flop between the two. Sometimes we ask the questions and hyperlinks is the top and then it's bookmarks. Those two are typically very high in those answers. Making sure fonts are embedded in the right way, etc. as well. So there's a lot of things that a lot of areas that take up a considerable amount of time. And this is a bit of a breakdown and kind of what we've heard. What I want to do really is mostly focus on, okay, well, what can we do rendering do? Often people think of rendering as the conversion tool to PDF. And while that is a very large part of what rendering can do, it can go a long way beyond that in helping with your content preparation processes as well. It can certainly help automate a lot of things that you might be doing manually today. You include those in these automated processes that are running in the background for you as part of your rendering process. So that's what I'm going to focus on really here. Really how you can use your rendering technology that some of them you may have in-house already. I'm obviously going to be providing the perspective from DocShifter about things that we can do, but obviously other technology can do some of the things that I'm talking about here as well. But look at your rendering technology. What exactly can it do for you? What, can you build your rules-based flows to say what should happen to what type of content, and leverage the metadata that's available to the content along with the content to help explain and tell the system what exactly it should do with it. How should it convert it? What type of report is it for automatic report generation? How do you want to check the file to the FDA specifications, to the PMDA specifications, which may be slightly different. All those things can be possible, but the more metadata you have available, which obviously is a key part of a document management system, the more that you can drive automation through your rendering platform within your existing content management systems. New thing obviously is also being able to incorporate, the use of artificial intelligence in those steps. So you could have steps as a standard workflow, pulling content, using that existing technology and using AI where it makes sense to do so as well. And I'll introduce that a little bit as we go. It leverages it, but in a controlled way if you use it through the rendering tech. So if we look at what rendering is, just beyond automation, so take the conversion to PDF out of it, what other things is it able to do? Well, the first thing is it can deal with content across your whole enterprise. So you may be familiar and say, yep, I can render my content if it's stored in my eNov repository or my Documentum repository or Viva or DocuBridge. That's fine, but you may have content sitting outside of those repositories as well. Realistically, your rendering platform should be able to pick up content across the whole enterprise, from the same platform, use the same kind of rules and automation that's possible in your controlled RIM environment, your controlled document management system, and process files in the same way. So you have consistency across the whole enterprise rather than just in your regulatory content as well. Obviously, we need to go beyond just those common formats, the Office formats, such as Word, Excel, probably largely familiar with converting those, but there are various image formats, technical formats like CAD and so on, but also moving towards formats like audio, video as well. Realistically, they should be able to handle and automate the preparation of that type of content as well. And then in terms of what you do with the content, in addition to converting to PDF, you can incorporate elements such as, checking your Word file, validating the Word file, or QCing the Word document even before you convert it. Doing a quality check, checking, is it really ready to convert already? Do you have any formatting issues? Issues that could cause problems with the PDF generation or further down the line when it's being included in a submission. Obviously, we've got the conversion elements in here, but you can also convert to other formats, not just to PDF. You can also convert out to formats like docx or XML or HTML, or convert from one video format to another to standardize on common formats as well. So as well as converting to PDF, which most people think of as rendering, it can be rendering or converting to many other formats as well. You can use it to merge multiple documents together as well. So as well as converting files, you can take multiple files, bring them together, add things like headers and footers, pagination, overlays, watermarks, some of the things you think in a kind of a publishing context. They can also be used at a more granular level on individual documents to achieve the goals of specific use cases as well. So we can add things like cover pages, automate hyperlinking, the generation of tables of contents and signing files, etc. as well as have steps that leverage AI technology as well. Things like translation of content or redaction of content. So leveraging that platform to because it already deals with the content, it's picking up and processing files and returning results. It could also pick it up for translation. Well, that could just be a step in the flow to convert it to PDF, translate it from one language to another, and return the results in a compliant way in a different language if you want, or redact out sensitive information as well automatically from the content. So again, that would just be a function. It's not a completely separate process in this case. If AI is in that controlled environment, those controlled flows, just using it where it makes sense, AI where it makes sense as well. Obviously, depending on the use cases, you'd combine different functions together is the idea. So if I want to use this for translation, I may use my conversion to PDF and do a translation, for example, and make it compliant all in one go. If I'm using reports, I may pull different functions to merge multiple files together, convert to PDF, add headers and footers and overlays. So you combine different functions depending on your use case. But again, all fully automatically in the background. And then obviously return the results back to your controlled repositories, to one or more as well. So when we talk about configurable automation, really what we're looking at is having flows created that describe the where is the content, what content do you want to process, what metadata do you want to use to help describe what should be done, how should you process the file and where should the results go. So you basically, if you look at, and I know it's a little tricky to see slightly, but the where, you're defining which repositories, where does your content reside right now for this flow, for what you want to do for this use case, where is the content that you want to process. Then the what content do you want to process. So you can limit it to certain types of files, certain types of content, certain document types, subtypes, etc. as well, categories of content. Use the metadata as much as possible to tell it a little bit more what it should do. So you may be having a workflow that checks your file, checks your Word document to see if it has any errors. But you could decide whether you want to fix it or just create a report. So just create a report telling you what the problems are, or actually go and fix the document. So you could leverage a piece of metadata that tells it, that's set in your document management system to say, at this point in the process, it just should be checking the document, not fixing anything, just checking it, in which case it pulls that metadata and just creates a report for you, returns the report for somebody to check, the results. Or it creates a fixed version of the document and stores that back in the repository. So you can use the metadata for that, or to include elements in your cover pages, your overlays, your pagination, your headers, footers, etc. as well. So again, the more metadata you pull, the more you can actually automate. Then how do you want to process the file? So we've pulled all the data, but then you have to say, well, what do I want to do with the content now? And that can be, converting it to PDF in a specific way to meet the different needs of different health authorities, validating the content or QCing the content, QCing your Word files, QCing the PDF files, etc. And then where do you want the results to go? So these are all configured in the background, and then they're running silently. And as users are processing and moving their content through the life cycles, these workflows automatically kick in to process the files in the way in which you've configured it to do it. So it's creating a controlled way. It can leverage AI, but it's in a controlled way as well. So the kind of things that can be automated. So beyond obviously just a conversion to PDF, which I'm not going to focus on in this session because that's how most people think of rendering anyway. So beyond that, what else can be automated? So I mentioned about QCing Word content. As we're pulling Word documents, at different points, it's useful to be able to check, are there any issues with the Word file? So as part of that life cycle, you may at certain points want to say, I want to identify any formatting or styling issues with my document. You may have the best templates in the world in place to kind of restrict how the content is authored, but authors will always find a way to bypass that or to kind of adjust it, kind of breaking the rules that you've tried to enforce through your templates. While you can enforce it to some extent, it's often possible, depending on your environment, to still adjust things so that it no longer complies with the rules in the template. The styles are using incorrect fonts or sizes and so on, something that's fundamental as that. They can be very difficult to find those issues in a document. Somebody's changed the fonts just of a few words within a paragraph. If you're visually looking at it, it can be quite tricky to find. So being able to automatically look for where your content doesn't adhere to the rules of your template, do that automatically. Look for paragraph related issues, section numbering issues. Do you have, are your numbers sequential? Does it go 1, 2, 3, 4? Is it going 1, jumping to 3, then to 6? Do you have any numbering issues like that, for example? Issues with tables not fitting the page width, so font sizes become too small, hyperlinks that are broken, that don't have a target set, fonts that are incorrect fonts that are used, etc. as well. So a lot of checks that you could run automatically to check what's wrong with the content. You just decide, well, what checks do you want to run at what point in the life cycle, and either have a report generated that says simply, this is a non-compliant document. Here are all the checks we ran, how many of each issue it identified, and then it goes into the detail of each of the issues that it found. It says, okay, I've got manual page breaks at this point in the document, this point in the document, etc. I got some highlighted texts. I've got some heading numbering issues, etc. So I won't go through all of that. This can be a very detailed report for every check that you ran, every single issue that it finds in it. You could either use that report to help the author. The author can then update it based on the report, or more ideally, you'll take the content, and very clearly not a piece of regulatory content here, just a simple dummy document, just to show you some potential issues. You may have, heading padding spaces in the headings, so you've got some additional spacing characters at the end or beginning of headers. You've got styling doesn't necessarily match the template, so you've got text that looks fine, but it may not be using the right normal font. For example, you may have some rule set to say it should be Times New Roman 11, whatever it may be, or Times New Roman 12, and somebody's changed it to be 11 or 13 or something, and you don't realize it. So does the styling meet the template? Do I have heading numbers out of sequence? So in this case, it goes 1, 3, 4. So it's obviously out of sequence. I got links to external websites, which I shouldn't really have in my content. I've got watermarks appearing behind the page, tables not fitting the page width. I've got empty paragraphs in the content or empty pages. I've got comments in the document, and I've got images that are maybe with the text that's not in line with the images, for example. So just some simple examples of issues. So as well as the report being able to identify those issues and tell you where they've been found, it could also potentially automatically just fix it and return, instead of a report, it's actually returning a fixed version of the document. So it fixes all of my heading numbering issues. It kind of removes my empty paragraphs, empty pages. I no longer have issues with styling not matching the templates. So if all of a sudden somebody's modified the text from my normal style, or my paragraph style in the document, it will revert it back to what it should be in your organization. He's removed the external links to external websites. Tables have been adjusted to fit the page width, for example, watermarks removed, and no longer having these issues with the text not appearing in line with the images. So just in terms of even before, not even dealing with PDF, obviously rendering, which is often what people think of rendering for, you can even look at the content even prior to that, and use the tech to look at the content and actually resolve many word issues even prior to kind of sending a document for conversion. When you're dealing with a conversion, in terms of preparing the PDF for use in a submission, we can automate in that conversion, and that can be converting from a non-compliant PDF to a compliant PDF. Often people think of rendering as just dealing with original source formats like Word or text, etc. as well. But you should be able to send a PDF file to be rendered as well. And that will then automate or automatically fix a lot of issues you may have with the bookmarking or the hyperlinking or the way the fonts have been embedded, etc. as well. So in terms of that PDF preparation, you could also use it to automatically add tables of contents where you may have a PDF that you're including in a submission, and anything over 5 or 10 pages, depending on where you're submitting that content, should have a table of content. And either you do that, leave that for the publishing process later on, or you could already do it earlier, like as part of the rendering process, and have it say, well, automatically any document that's intended for use in the US or Canada will have, depending on whether it's 5 or 10 pages, it would automatically add a TOC if it doesn't already exist to that PDF rendition automatically. Even though the source document doesn't have a TOC, it could add one for you where it's necessary as part of that automated process. And that's just not TOCs, that's also table of tables, table of figures, etc. as well. Does it need to add additional header and footer information and so on as well? Optimize the PDF for fast web view, making sure it's compliant as well. The initial view settings, etc. are all in place. So all those things that are needed for compliance can be automated, even if the file is already a PDF. It may not be a compliant PDF, so we can render it again. And additional things in terms of preparing PDFs is things like automating elements like hyperlinking. So there's obviously a number of organizations spoke as well at the RSIDM, including in our session, about some automation of things like hyperlinking. What's often the case is you have documents, content that has various captions in it, tables, figures, paragraph, diagrams, etc. But then you have obviously your narrative text that refers to those tables or those captions, but sometimes they're not actually turned into hyperlinks. So in this case, I have my narrative text referring to tables, table 1, table 12, figure 1, but none of those are hyperlinks yet. So you could have, as part of that automated process as well, have it automatically convert that text into hyperlinks to the relevant captions as well. So rather than somebody having to go in and manually add them because they weren't put in at authoring stage as they should have been, you could have these rules defined that basically say when exactly or what type of text should be converted. And when that file is processed, it can be, doesn't have to be as part of a rendering flow. It can be just be updating the existing Word document. So what I've done here is I've processed it, added hyperlinks automatically as part of an automated flow. I've added hyperlinks to my tables, figures, etc. These are now active hyperlinks without the user having to do anything at all. It's just rules-based, and it updates and either creates a new version of your Word document with the hyperlinks, or creates a new version and then renders the version as well. So it can be a seamless flow that does both all in one go. Same thing with bookmarking. If you're already at the PDF stage, and you may receive a lot of PDFs that maybe don't have bookmarks for some reason, either because of the tools they were using that simply weren't able to generate bookmarks, or maybe because the files were OCR'd, they were scanned, and they have no bookmarks because they were scanned and maybe OCR'd afterwards. So they become a text-based document of sorts, but they have no bookmarks. What you can do is set up some automation to define, well, what kind of text should be, let's set up some automated rules for looking for text in a certain font, size, style, containing certain characters, or a combination of all those things. If those rules are met, those things will be converted then into bookmarks. So instead of you having to go through and manually add, select areas, select text to turn into a bookmark, or even using batch tools, which can be great. There are tools that are plugins that kind of do some of this for you. That's still semi-manual. Even batch is semi-manual. You have to engage in the process. You have to open the file. You have to kick it off, and it kind of maybe does something. But at the end of the day, there's still a manual step involved in that, even in batch processes. Here, it could be completely seamless and automated as well. So in this case, I've got my bookmarks were generated fully automatically for me based on the rules that I defined without any human step involved at all. So again, reducing the risk further. Once you've got a PDF as well, one of the last steps you want to do is make sure that the PDF is really health authority ready. And for many organizations, that means including the PDF in a submission and running the submission validation after you do a publish. You publish, you run a submission validation that also checks the individual PDF files to make sure they meet the PDF specifications of that specific health authority. What this allows you to do is check those things much earlier. The moment you have a PDF, you can already check, is it a health authority ready? You know, even the moment you have a rendition, you can already begin checking that, identifying issues that might require you to go back to the original source document to make an update to resolve. So the idea here is you can QC, you can actually check for compliance issues and other formatting and other technical issues with the PDF. And those are things like, is it the right PDF version? You know, is it a text searchable document? So if it's a scan document, has that been OCR'd? So you've got text elements in it and has bookmarks, etc. If you have bookmarks and hyperlinks, are they set to inherit zoom on the link? You know, zoom levels are set correctly. You know, it doesn't exceed file size limits. Fonts have been embedded in the correct way and only using the correct fonts, etc., along with a number of other checks that you could run on the PDF file. So that report will then create, and it's basically like your QC check on the individual documents themselves, but you can do this much earlier, well before you begin publishing, before you even include the document in the submission. So this then is like your QC check on the PDFs. Basically tells me what checks it ran, and then it gives me a summary of each individual check, whether it passed or failed that check. Is it the right version? Is it optimized for fast web view, etc.? And you get a simple pass or fail. And then along with anything that's failed, it then gives you the detail in the report saying, okay, this current version is 1.4, and I probably told it in this case, I wanted to make sure that it was 1.7, for example. Some fonts weren't embedded correctly, and it tells me which fonts weren't embedded in the correct way. Some bookmarking issues, some hyperlink issues, for example. You can check that my hyperlinks are all blue. Or it can check that do you have any text that is blue but isn't a hyperlink? You can help you identify those things as well. And that way, that might be a part of your process to deliberately author your content with blue text that somebody will convert to a hyperlink later. This allows you to identify those things in a report that you can give to somebody to say, okay, here's where all your links are, all the text is that you need to convert and make sure converted into actual hyperlinks as part of your publishing process, for example. So it just helps and streamlines that process as well. Of course, everything that identifies here, it could automatically potentially fix as well. Many of these things, just a wrong PDF version, fonts haven't been embedded correctly. Simply by reprocessing that file or re-rendering it, you should be able to fix most of those issues as well. And if you can't, you've at least identified it much earlier than if you only do this after you publish something. In terms of your automated report generation, again, it can be used not just for individual documents, but to generate reports that, again, leverage the metadata and add things like, merge multiple documents together, add cover pages, headers, footers, TOCs, watermarks, do all of this automatically for you. So all you have to focus on is creating the collection of documents, and then they get sent off to be processed. Different types of reports can be processed in different ways, including things like cover pages that pull metadata from your repository, detailed sets of bookmarks, and tables of contents that can be generated. Again, these are TOCs that are spanning multiple individual source documents, but across within the context of the report. Every link bookmark is set to inherit zoom, etc. as well. So again, it can be used to rendering can be used to automatically generate reports. So rather than all those things that you can do on an individual document level, if you're able to merge multiple files together, you can automate a lot of your report processes too. In terms of AI use, the idea here is providing a framework to use AI in a controlled, configurable way. So you use the same kind of workflows to configure the automation. Where is the content? When should it be processed? What content, how, etc. But then it can have a step in it that uses generative AI to incorporate things like translation or redaction. And those numbers that are 38 and 19% are based on Steve Gentz's surveys in how many organizations or what percentage of organizations are looking at trying to automate translation or redaction through the use of AI. Just so you understand what those numbers are there, that's based on Steve's kind of most recent surveys. So a lot of organizations are looking to try to automate their translation processes or redaction, and things like the rendering platform can provide a controlled platform or framework for you to do that. So again, the idea here is that you're in control, that you're able to leverage your existing content workflows. So we're already processing content through, rendering workflows. So you can just leverage the same technology that's already in place and just adding AI steps. So it provides more control over when and how AI is used. Obviously, that gives you a little bit more confidence in that it's not a completely new technology. It's using existing technology. It is kind of proven already for you in the organization. And again, you can leverage metadata, of your existing environment, your existing content to help drive automation or how AI is used as well. So if we look at translation, the idea here is there's a lot of content that requires translation across the organization, from clinical trial info all the way through the lifecycle across the organization, all the way through to administrative content as well. And obviously an accurate kind of translation is critical, and that's AI is a very effective way of doing that. So if you take a scenario where you have, laboratories across your organization in different countries, and in this case, I'm just using an SOP as an example. I may have an SOP or some content in Japan, in Japanese. I have no idea what that's saying because I don't speak Japanese. So what I'm able to do is potentially leverage AI or automation to automatically provide an English language version of that document to myself here in Europe or in the US, for example. So I can automatically translate that content. Same thing if I'm in Brazil and I'm writing an SOP, in this case in Portuguese. Same thing, I can have that automatically translated in a contextual way using AI, not like the old Google Translate, which you may have used, where you send in, it's translating word by word. It really understands the context and the meaning of each paragraph as well. So the use of AI in translation is a lot more effective as well. You may still need a manual step or human step in there to provide a final QC on the translations, but it's certainly a step that a lot of translation services will go through, is leveraging AI as well. And that part can be fully automated. Same thing if you're talking about regulatory content like the pill, you may have that available in English, and I need to then provide copies in multiple languages wherever I'm going to submit that. So I could automatically have it translated into all languages necessary, depending on where that content is going to be submitted. Okay. Again, that's just another step then in the workflow. Again, just have an AI step in an existing workflow. So again, with redaction, it's very similar. You have information that you might want to redact out, black out, because it's client is sensitive information commercially, or about patient information, etc. as well. So you may have a number of pieces that you need to redact. So you could have, again, a very simple piece of content that needs to be redacted, taking out some of the sensitive info like my name, age. Age basically equals old in my case, addresses and so on. But I don't want to redact out everything. So in this case, I've just got it configured to say what type of content needs to be redacted. And that would happen automatically. And it can be redacted in different ways to black the text out. The text doesn't appear behind it, so you can't select it. Is it simply deleting or removing the text, replacing the text with some redaction text, or just replacing it with asterisks as well? So you can decide how that will be redacted exactly. But again, configurable, fully automated, leveraging AI. So just some closing remarks. Really, just the idea is to look at what your rendering technology can do and how it could automate beyond just the creation of PDFs. Often organizations will have rendering tech implemented, and all it's doing is converting to PDF. And while that's extremely valuable, there's often a lot more that it can be used for to drive more automation of your content as well. So look at rendering solution again. It can do far more than convert into PDF, and obviously understand that AI is beginning to be introduced there as well to further allow for automation of some of your content processes. And in our case, we've implementing translation and redaction as two of those things, and that will increase over time, obviously, as well as AI is accepted more and more.